This is John Prasinos, Editorial Director of Investing Daily, and with me is Dr. Stephen Lieb. If you watch a lot of financial television, he needs no introduction. Dr. Lieb is a Chief Investment Strategist of Real World Investing and The Complete Investor. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm a little under the weather, John, but I'm doing pretty well. These markets keep you up, I'll tell you that.
Yes, they do. Well, here's the first question. What are the most significant mega trends that you see unfolding in 2021 that are of great importance for investors?
John, I think that it basically is going to be a continuation of what we saw last century. I mean, this century, the first generation of this century. And it was kind of sub rosa. I mean, not a lot of people are talking about it, but the fact that the developing world has finally started to catch up with the developed world. I think for the first times in the post-World War II period, certainly, growth in the developing world was considerably faster than the developed world. And that is going to continue. Recently, I mean, when I say recently, I'm talking within the past couple of weeks, the developing world, mostly the developing world, signed a multilateral trade agreement called RCEP. Don't ask me what the symbols or the letters stand for, but it means that they signed an agreement initiating the largest multilateral trade legislation or trade agreement in the history of mankind. And this is with the Asian countries and China, and basically includes, I would say, most of the members of most of the signatories, the vast majority were part of the developing world. This will just further advance their growth. I mean, this trading agreement. There are other trading agreements that are likely to be signed, perhaps this year, involving China and other developing nations. Developing countries are really going, and it started with the entry of China into the World Trade Organization in 2001. And what angers me, to be very, very honest about this is something that's been apparent for, again, probably a generation. I actually wrote about this in one of my books in 1999. And while I think a lot of that book was original, it may be right or wrong, this wasn't original. What I said back then was that the developing world was going to become much more of a factor. You saw it. You saw it with China. You saw it with their, upcoming entrance into the World Trade Organization. And one of my big beefs here is still, when you go to a financial advisor, if I were to go to a financial advisor tomorrow, if anybody does, if a pension fund goes there, they will be told to take the ideal asset allocation is 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Where are commodities? Okay, in the last generation, I'm not just talking a one-off year or anything. I'm talking about 20 years. Gold, which is basically the king of the commodities for various reasons that I talk about in my latest book, gold will almost always, over a period of time, outperform other commodities. Gold during this generation, yes, that we just completed, gold gained over six-fold, 6.5-fold, something in that neighborhood. S&P 500, dividends reinvested, gained about 4-fold. Now, and bonds gained about 3.5-fold. In other words, the typical allocation that the individual investor is told to buy is just stocks and bonds. That's a terrible idea. And it's an idea that the financial industry could have easily seen. Nothing secret about it, that gold was going to do fairly well and commodities were going to do fairly well. And incidentally, copper also outperformed stocks. Silver also outperformed stocks, and iron ore also outperformed stocks. As we speak, we're 11 months into the new year. Well, copper, for one, is up from 220 to about 360. since from its low. It's outperforming stocks. Gold is a little bit of a laggard right now, but don't bet it on it being a laggard for a long time. So when you see a macro trend, there's nothing more macro than the fact that if you divide the world into two parts, developing, and which is about 85% of the world, and developed, which is us and Europe, etc., it's 15% of the world, that the developing world is going to continue to grow faster than the developed part of the world. What this has been compounded by, two factors. One, immediate. For whatever reasons, the coronavirus affected the developed world much more than the developing world. Just to take an example, in the USA, we have had nearly as many deaths as has all of Asia. Asia has about 140 times more people than the USA. Now that's an astounding difference in terms of effect of the pandemic. And that again has boosted growth in the developing world and has held growth back in the developed world. So that, I think, is, the other trend, which I want to mention in conjunction with this, is that there is going to be a massive tendency to switch toward renewable energies. That is in the cards. I'll talk about that in a later question. But renewable energies and all that it implies, and it implies a tremendous amount, everything from technology to the environment to food, in some ways health. That trend is going to basically almost overwhelm everything else, and it's going to also magnify the trend of the developing world's growth in the sense that you can't just turn a switch on, no pun intended, and switch from fossil fuels running the world to solar and wind running the world. In fact, it's not going to even happen in the next 20 years, but it will make a lot of progress in that direction. That's in the cards.